To me, Chord's Hugo 2 is the best sounding and most resolving portable digital audio device out there, with a high-powered FPGA-based DAC inside and a very capable headphone output and line output. It is one of the best sounding components I've ever used, especially in its price range. The problem is, if on the go especially, I mean, it's quite bulky, and also you have to add something like a smartphone or a DAP to use as a music source to it. Now, Chord solved this problem with the Mojo by making the Poly, which attached to it and made it a wireless hotspot and streamer so that you could play music from a micro SD card or stream music to it losslessly. Now, with the Hugo 2, of course, we knew that from the screw holes in the back that there would eventually be a poly-like solution for the Hugo 2, and that came in the form of the 2Go. And the 2Go, once it's attached to the Hugo 2, makes the whole thing an all-in-one digital to analog streaming and conversion system, which can just sit on your desk, unlike all this stuff, which takes up, well, a whole rack. So the question is, how well does it perform as a streaming and digital playback solution? And for that, Chord sent me one to find out. Just quickly before we get started, I wanted to recommend Backblaze for online backups. This is a company I have been using for many years to back up all my stuff, all my video recordings, absolutely everything, terabytes of it. Now, they offer for a flat rate, you can back up as much as you like, completely unlimited, completely unthrottled, on one computer. And that, for example, if I were to back up all my video online via conventional cloud backups, it would cost me hundreds or thousands of dollars per month. This is a flat rate for 1 month or 1 year. And they have a 30-day trial, so you can try them out and see how you go and see if it works for you. And if you did have a catastrophe, for example, where you lost absolutely everything, all your computers and everything, you'd have all your stuff backed up online. So just check out the link in the description or on screen for that, and that also helps support my videos a little bit as well. I have the Hugo 2 and 2Go set up here in front of my computer. It's actually, the small size of this setup is very convenient compared to, say, the big components behind me, because I can control everything here, I can do everything right in front of me. And I have, you can see, it's hooked into a pair of Final D8000 Pro headphones, and it's also connected to the power, so it's in desktop mode here. Now, if you weren't already aware, the Hugo 2 does go into desktop mode after 24 hours, so it lowers the battery level to 80% and aims to preserve the battery life even when you're not using it on the go. So when you do use it on the go, it can charge it up to 100% and then you can take it with you. Now, I also have it hooked, the 2Go hooked into a wired network. Now, I do have wireless. You can probably just see behind the computer the edge of the Wi-Fi router, but where at all possible, due to all the phones and tablets and what have you that are on my wireless network, I prefer not to use any device with wireless at all possible and use the wired network where I am able to. And I also have it hooked up, in this case, to not just headphones, but I have a RCA double adapters here, one output of which goes to a power amp in one direction, so I can listen to speakers if I want, because it makes for very easy volume control right in front of me, very high quality volume control at that. And I also have it hooked up to the Studio 6 in the other direction for when I want a little bit of tube goodness in my listening rather than just the direct output of the Hugo 2. So also I have it an input actually from an SPDIF converter directly from my computer when I want to listen with YouTube, because I don't want to use the AirPlay streaming that I can use with the 2Go, because kind of the issues with sync delay, the timing of, we seeing someone's mouth move and then having a bit of a delay is kind of not so good. So the old iMac I had did have optical digital output, and I regret that my new one doesn't, because I would have loved to have just a short optical cable from my computer instead. That would have worked out actually very well. But alas, it is what it is. Now, in terms of streaming to the 2Go, there are two main methods. Well, there's actually three. I mentioned AirPlay will work is one of them, but AirPlay is kind of limited. It's not high res. But for a lot of things like watching stuff or listening to music, say like YouTube music or what have you, it's fine. The other two methods are a little bit more interesting. One is Roon. Now, Roon software, which I have on the screen here, is, well, it's an interesting setup if you haven't heard of it already. If you imagine normal playback software has three particular functions. The first is a library of your music. So it collects together all the files on your computer, which are music files, and as well as streaming services, so that you can have access to those as well. And the second function is it allows you to play those back. So you have an interface, which allows you to click and select what have you. And the third thing is it has an output to the device that you're playing back music to, usually say a USB device you've plugged into your computer. Now the useful thing about Roon is it can split those three functions across all the devices on your network. So what you do is you pay a license for one library. In this case, you can probably just see the edge of the Mac Mini I have here, which has my Roon music library on it. But the output can be to any other device which has a Roon endpoint on it. So in that case, it could be that I've got another Mac Mini sitting under the desk behind me where I hook up things such as all the DACs I'm testing, and then I can have the a output to say a device such as a tablet, as well as the To-Go, which has a Roon endpoint built in there. And then I can control it, of course, from my iMac, from the iPad. You can have any combination you like, and it makes it very convenient for things like you could stream it through a wireless network to another device or another system. And that means you don't have to have everything wired up. You don't have to have one particular kind of one device that does everything. It works out very well. So if you're one of those people who has a hi-fi system, want to sit back and control everything from the tablet, that works out brilliantly. Now the second system is not actually one piece of software, but a system of software interaction called DLNA, or the Digital Living Network Alliance. Now this is a system that allows interoperability between different kinds of software, where it can stream multimedia software from any particular device on your network to any other, and you can control it from any. So much like Roon, except that your library isn't limited to one library, but can be any device. So, for example, I have this portable player here, and it has, you can see, Patricia Barber's face on there. And what's going on here is I'm playing back Patricia Barber, which is stored on the micro SD cards in the To-Go through to the Hugo 2. Now I can also stream music from this device through the To-Go into the Hugo 2 as well. So this music source can be files that are on the micro SD cards that are in the To-Go, or they can actually be something like the files that are already on a smartphone or on another computer or some other device on the network. And that allows, much the same kind of thing. But it allows the library not just to be one device, but to be any device on your network that does have a DLNA server, something that can serve up those files. And DLNA also supports multimedia, although in this case, this is just audio playback. So those are the three main methods that you play back music through the To-Go. It's a networked streaming device, much like the SoundAware D300 reference behind me, except all in a small compact box here, which hooks directly up to the Hugo 2. Now let's have a look at now how that actually works and setting that up, because that's where things get a little bit more interesting in how you arrange and prepare the To-Go to work on your network, and how you set it up so you can stream to and from it, and set up the micro SD cards and use it in general. I've disconnected the To-Go and Hugo 2 here so I can show you the setup. To start with, there actually is only a single button on the whole device, and that is the button for power. And well, there's a menu option which you'll find very interesting, which I'll talk about in a bit when I talk about the setting it up through the app. And it shows a solid blue or green light for wireless or wired network respectively, and flashing as necessary when it's trying to connect. And what I tend to do is, if I can't see this while it's set up on my desk actually, what I do is, while it's sitting here, I actually put my finger up just above it. I don't know if you can see, you'll be able to see on the camera, but at least for me, when I do this, I can just see the reflection of the light across my finger. Maybe you can just see a little fraction of blue show up there. And rather than have to have a hand mirror around all the time, it's bright enough that I can see it sufficiently to see its status. Now of that, there are two more status lights. Now the To-Go status light is not showing anything. It indicates, say, when you put a micro SD card in, it will start to flash multiple colors to show that it's updating the micro SD card database. And the charge status, well, that's very familiar if you already own Chord products. It shows as the battery goes down, blue, green, yellow, red, and flashing red as the power goes down towards 0. Unfortunately, Chord are still stuck with micro USB. I mean, if they switch to USB-C on everything, it would probably cause a lot of consternation with customers buying the wrong product. So they are kind of stuck with micro USB at this moment, and that's what they're using. So maybe in future products they will have updated versions with that. But it's kind of mute because you attach the To-Go itself via 2 locking screws into the Hugo, 2 at the back, and then you slide this on as you saw me do at the beginning of the video. And then once that's slid on, you do tighten these 2 hex screws, one on either side, and that locks the to-go in place. So it's very secure, not as I probably made it look very insecure when I showed it at the beginning of the video, but that was just for show. It is locked on there very tightly. So let's take a look at the software for setting up the to-go. Now we have the Go Figure software here on a FIO DAP, which I've just got resting against the Hugo 2 and to-go. Now, if you want to quickly, there is a quick access to the menu system which doesn't require any kind of smartphone or DAP, and that is just accessed by pressing the button on the side. So if I press that, you'll hear this robotic voice, and if you
firmware version.
So for the example, you can hear it saying the firmware version, and you can select other stuff.
Firmware version is 1.0.3.
Whoa, that's a bit of a bit startling.
Returning to menu.
Bit startling if you've got headphones plugged in, I must say, because it's a little bit loud, and that was actually the normal listening level I had for playing back music through my speakers. Anyhow, now I won't go through the menu options there. I don't think you really want to hear that robotic voice if at all possible, but it was very thoughtful of them to include something like that so you can quickly access settings without having to open up a particular app on your smartphone. Anyway, let's have a look at the Go Figure software. Now, it is very slightly different on Android and on iOS, but the differences are kind of minimal. Now, in the Android version, you'll see 2 versions of the same to-go come up, and this one is accessible by Bluetooth, and this one accessible by Wi-Fi, or through the network, I should say. And of course, these will come up if you're using the hotspot mode as well. And the Bluetooth version is the default if you're not connected to a network with the to-go, so you can access it at any time. But the Wi-Fi version is going to be faster. Now, the iOS thing only shows 1 and will automatically select. So on Android, you have maybe that extra option, and there's also this connection method option as well. So now we're in the screen. It gives you a basic overview of the setup. Now, here you can see it's connected to wired Ethernet. That's indicated there. Now, the Wi-Fi option, I should mention here, there is only the 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi option available. There is no 5 gigahertz. Now, this was a deliberate choice by Chord. For reliability, 2.4 gigahertz networks are generally more reliable. You can probably have noticed if you've had something like a phone or what have you, that it will show a better connection if you have a 2.4 gigahertz connection and you're not quite near your Wi-Fi router. Whereas a 5 gigahertz one will show a kind of lower number of bars for connection. So it requires, for that higher speed of a 5 gigahertz network, maybe the connection is not quite as robust. Now, some people have complained about this, especially people who live in apartments where there are many Wi-Fi networks around. I mean, most people just grab a Wi-Fi router, set it up and go, and they're very often likely connecting through 2.4 gigahertz and not 5 gigahertz. And for those people, the 5 gigahertz networks may be maybe less crowded, and they may want that option. And I do kind of wish they had included it, but I don't think this was carelessness on the part of Chord, but deliberate for aiming for reliability. Now, whether that's good or bad, I mean, you'd have to do extensive testing, and I presume Chord or the company that actually did all the hardware and software for the to-go did that themselves. So, but still, I wish they had that option, so at least you could choose it in case you do have network issues. And that's probably one of the negatives of the to-go, is that Wi-Fi can be very crowded for some people. However, now you have quick selection across the top here, and we'll see these options in the settings, which we may, and there are some playback options as well, although not quite so many. And some of these options I'm going to show you, they're all in the settings, as well as the quick access options at the top. Now, airplane mode, you can see there was an airplane up there. It's self-explanatory. It just limits, I believe, the to-go to Bluetooth and turns off Wi-Fi. Although nowadays on airplanes they have Wi-Fi anyway, so it's kind of redundant. Hotspot mode, well, that, of course, instead of connecting to your network, that turns the to-go into a Wi-Fi hotspot, so you can connect to it directly and then play music to it directly. Like if you're not using any kind of network, say if you're in a hotel or something, you probably want to use hotspot mode. Of course, we have Wi-Fi selection. You can do that through here. Of course, it says wired Ethernet, so nothing will show up if I tap that. Selected SD card, and this is one of the limitations of the to-go, is that you can only use one of the 2 SD cards you've put in there, and you have to choose left or right. Now, it could just simply be a memory limitation. Holding 2 databases of SD card information could be a limit, or there's probably some kind of limit just as remember the original Hugo had a limit about how much stuff it could hold, how many options were available, so the volume kept resetting every time you turn it back on because the fidelity was chosen over having having a say volume setting in the memory storage. So there could be some kind of limitation there that provides that. Can be for some people who have a huge library. If it won't fit on a 1 terabyte SanDisk card, well, then you're kind of, well, out of luck. DSD bit perfect. Now this is less to do with the Hugo 2 and more to do with the 2Go itself. So in the future, of course, there will be the 2U, which will turn the 2Go into a dedicated separate wireless or Wi-Fi or networked streamer for connecting to other DACs and what have you. Now, let's say you have DSD come in. Well, DSD, you cannot apply volume to DSD for technical reasons, which are beyond this video. So if you want to apply volume to it, you actually have to convert it to PCM first. So if you turn off bit perfect mode and you want volume control of the DSD, then you have to turn off bit perfect mode and it will convert DSD internally into PCM. So that's what that's about. But kind of irrelevant if you're just connecting it to a 2Go because you want to play back DSD through the Hugo 2 anyway. General settings is misnamed. This is actually more the about screen. It actually just gives you an overview of how everything is set up. The device settings are actually the settings. So basically the name of the 2Go and the pins for the Bluetooth and hotspot password. And there's also a wizard when you first run Go Figure, which will set everything up. Or I should say first set up your 2Go. The music services login, well, that's fairly self-explanatory. That just gives you your login. Now some kinds of software can get this to stream Tidal through the 2Go, and some can't. So you need software that can do that. But if you do have software that can do that, I think mConnect may be able to do it. I could be wrong. Then you can do that. But there's no option to actually play back Tidal or Cobars through this software. You have to use separate software, which is something I'll get into in a little bit as well. Firmware update, well, what will happen here is it can connect to the internet and find if there is any updated firmware available, and if there is, it will pop up on here and will update it itself. And we're using version 1.0.3 of the firmware and the latest version of the Go Figure software. So then, probably relevant there to look at music. As for music goes, the music playback options are very simple. I mean, it's not designed to be a dedicated music playback system, and customers requested that this features be added. But the only thing you can do is use separate software for creating playlists on the microSD card, which I've done here. I've just created a playlist from one of the albums I like, and then tap on that. You can just basically play it. It won't show you a list of songs or any such thing. That's all you can do. And I'll show you that in just a second, though. But there is the option of radio. Radio, there's some stored radio stations in here, mostly UK stuff, and you can add your own station down here, and which if you know the URL, streaming URL, you can do that. Now unfortunately it won't allow, I've put Radio Paradise in here, but it only has the ability to play back the MP3 version and the FLAC version, which is very rare for a streaming radio station. It doesn't have the ability for that, unfortunately. My regret, because I like Radio Paradise. But for actually playing back, for actually creating playlists for playback, if you do that, you need this software like MALP, which you connect to the 2Go, and other software could presumably do it. I think maybe Regalian on iOS could possibly do it, or 8Player, I'm not sure. And you can see the playlist that I've created in here, and the Chord provides instructions on how to do that, and then you can play that back as normal and access all the files on the microSD card as you have, if you have any player, and of course, which can access a DLNA kind of server. You can actually use that for playback. And again, there's a variety of out there, and you can kind of experiment yourself and find out. But that's basically how you play back music, by using one of these players, DLNA players, to access the files on the microSD card. Now, of course, the aspect you've all been wondering about is the sonic performance of the 2Go as a transport. Now, we know that the Hugo 2 is very sensitive to transport quality. As a portable device, it can't have completely isolated USB, as that wouldn't work with something like a phone or a portable player if you connect it via USB. So it does have some more sensitivity than it might ideally would, say if you bought a desktop component like the Q-Test, which does have isolated USB. Therefore, it was a good test for kind of transport quality. And over the the years that I've now had the Hugo 2, I've been able to test different SPDIF converters and different devices and find which works best. And the best so far after all of them, at least from what I've tested, has been this SoundAware D300 reference. Although it doesn't have super high res and all that, it's actually designed, the manufacturer said, for example, that he didn't want to have super high DSD or PCM rates because they actually have worse overall quality than the up to DSD 128 or PCM up to 192K. And in that, I connected it often with the Hugo 2 through the SPDIF port, and that produced the best results of what I heard. The least amount of kind of edginess in the highs, the smoothest sound, most even sound. And it was interesting to compare the 2 Go with it. Now, the other option, of course, for the Hugo 2 is the optical input, and that can sound fantastic as well, because the main thing is that can go wrong with optical is jitter, and the Hugo 2 manages jitter excellently and will produce much the same sound as a high-end transport if you do have a bit-perfect optical source. So the 2 Go, I can say, matched the SoundAware and a good optical source as an excellent transport. And to put it in context, for example, I've seen people go from a direct computer to Hugo 2 connection to a 2 Go, pun not intended, and actually go, wow, the sound quality is improved considerably. And the thing with transports is, if you do have like a sound that's a bit more brighter and more glary, is that some people can get the impression, oh, that's got more detail, when really it's actually not that. You're actually hearing some distortion caused by noise coming through the USB ground plane. Now, if you do have something disconnected from the power and just not connected to anything at all except through the USB, then that noise should stop. And this is how Rob Watts usually manages from his laptop computer to, say, one of his Chord devices that he has helped design. But he, interestingly, and this is one of those kind of quagmires that the audiophiles get into, is that he changed laptops and found that, wait, this sounds slightly different. And it's one of those things we don't quite know why. Maybe something is creeping into the system which we not aware of, or something odd is going on through the electronics. And it's one of those things where it crosses between, we know the science behind a lot of this stuff, but actually nailing down specifically what's going on can be very tricky, and it's why we end up just listening and trying stuff and seeing what we like. But if you're curious, a good transport should not have any of that glariness or harshness when you use it with a device such as this. And I think that's why some people find the Hugo 2 a little bit kind of bright, and sometimes that can come through that harshness from a less than ideal transport and make it sound like glary and harsh more so than is ideal. But with the 2 Go, there was none of that whatsoever. You just have that beautiful clarity that the 2 Go produces, and that great sense of, accurate sense of depth of the music comes through very nicely and makes long period listening very easy and very pleasant, even direct with headphones, where it might not sound quite as kind of soft and euphonic as maybe my tube setup, which does very, very slightly sound different, but still just produces that really great sense of clarity and the nuances in the music. And the 2 Go brought that out as well and as good as the SoundAware D300 ref that I have behind me, which I was using primarily as a transport. As an all-in-one solution, the 2 Go and Hugo 2 make for, an entire headphone hi-fi system in one unit. And if I wasn't doing all this review stuff, I think I'd abolish this entire rack of stuff and just stick with something like this, and maybe hide an M scaler under my desk. But all things considered, as a transportable device, you can take this setup with you and you can use it, say, in a hotel room or whatever, and have that with a good pair of in-ear monitors or high-end headphones, and have a really great traveling system or a compact system to use on a desk at home or work, especially when a lot of people are working from home. This is certainly very compact and very neat, and a lot of companies you see now are trying to make compact and neat rigs, but none have the performance of this kind of system. The only, of course, negatives are that the setup can and sometimes has been a little bit glitchy, although most of that is sorted out pretty much now. If you look at the forums now, you'll see people complaining about issues. Most of those have been sorted. Some of them were to do with Rune and some of them to do with the software, and they're still working on it. Now, obviously, the 2 Go and the software are actually not made directly by Chord, but by a third party. So there are, especially in this particular year when the pandemic on and those kinds of things, does slow down some of the development updates a little bit. But generally, once it's set up, it works very, very well, and it just, music just plays back through Roon or through Audivana or through, if I'm using a portable device, works fine, and allows me, to have great and simplified music playback and a lot of variety of options of how I play back music and what's set up and where I use it. So that's Chords to go. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified when I have a new video out. Also, before you go, thanks to everyone who has supported making these videos. Why not join them? Would you consider buying me a coffee once in a while? Well, if you would, I will happily help you out with buying advice. You can literally sign up to the Patreon page and get buying advice straight away from me. You can also join in our little chat where we all have a really great time chatting about audio gear and other gear. And also you can see my impressions of gear before everyone else. You can also see some of these videos and my early experiments and behind the scenes stuff. Only supporters get to see my behind the scenes videos. So consider joining up and joining our little community and help me out. I'll help you out and we all win. So amos.io/support for more information about how you can help me and how I can help you. So as always, thanks once again for watching and I'll see you online.